Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the 2025 Latinx Book Festival. We're so honored to be here with you today to give you a little idea of who we are, what we do, and talk a little bit of suspense and tension using the senses. So, we both write kind of horror stories, and we're going to give you a little insight onto how we make that magic happen. First, I'm going to hand it over to Cassandra so she can introduce herself and her work.
Hey, hi, I'm Cassandra Ramos-Gomez. I'm a middle grades horror author. I like to center my stories around Latinx experiences. My debut novel is Lost on Doll Island, which releases August 26th of this year with Simon and Schuster. And since in this lesson we're going to be discussing crafting tension and horror stories, I wanted to share that as a kid, I was always drawn to like spooky and supernatural stories, and I loved to make my dad tell me ghost stories on long car rides, stories like La Llorona. And I still remember getting, just the chills as he went through all the details of like the muddy hem of her dress on the riverbanks, and her mournful cries, and all those little details really helped paint the picture and build up the tension of the story. And so the fear that I felt real. And so I'm really looking forward to today's topic.
Um, I am the same way. I also grew up with those spooky stories like La Llorona, La Segua, and it really shaped who I am as a writer. Um, Speaking of La Llorona, I wrote a similar folkloric creature in These Vengeful Wishes, which is my second book out. And my first book, A Tall Dark Trouble, is like a practical magic retelling, Latinx. But for me, I am Vanessa Montalban. I write genre bendy fantasy that usually has mystery, horror, sometimes historical elements. And finally, my third book, Midnight's Vicious Toll, releases 2027 with Penguin Random House. So, like I said, I also grew up with those kind of spooky stories. I loved reading R.L. Stine, Lois Duncan. My favorite movies were like The Craft. So anything unsettling and magical really draws me in. And it's those little details that make a story come to life. So one summer, I was staying at my cousin's house and we were reading an anthology of scary stories, keeping ourselves up, and we could hear every creak and groan in her house. And it was just dry, like the spookiness was so much that I had to get it down on a page. So we actually wrote a short story about a haunted grandfather's clock, and that was, the start of my origin story as a writer for sure. So next we're gonna go into Lost on Doll Island, and Cassandra's gonna go through her book, what it's about.
Yeah. So in my book, Lost on Doll Island, Diego's the main character. He's a Mexican American boy he's been sent to Mexico City to temporarily live with his tios while his parents are going through a divorce. And he basically feels totally trapped. He's trapped in this new place. He's trapped in his arm cast because he has a broken arm. And he's just basically just wants to get out of there. Most of all, he feels like just trapped in and this also a secret that he has because ever since he got to Mexico City, he started having strange dreams of dolls calling his name, or one particular doll calling his name, and he starts hearing that voice throughout the story. So then he hears about La Isla de las Muñecas, an island with a legendary doll that can make children's wishes come true. And Diego feels that if he can harness the power of this wish doll, then he can get everything he wants and go back to the way his life was before the divorce. So throughout the journey, tension is felt through sensory details, like when he hears the doll's creepy voice call out to him, and the sensory details help heighten the tension and ultimately, hopefully, amplify the horror for the readers. Sorry.
I love that. It's so creepy. I got like goosebumps. I recently went to Casadega, Florida, which has like a little haunted museum and there's like a little doll section. So it's fresh in my head, like the spooky dolls. So this is giving all that creepy doll atmosphere.
Creepy dollies. Yeah.
And then now we're going to go into my book that I'm going to be focusing on, which is These Vengeful Wishes. And like I said earlier, it's a retelling of a Nicaraguan folklore of La Segua. And it's a legend of a vengeful spirit that lures drunken and adulterous men into the woods with her beauty, only to reveal a skeletal horse face and then petrify them to death. But the story is based in the modern day, so it focuses on a teen girl called Cecilia Navarrete, and she's a lonely girl who's forced to move to a haunted town with her self absorbed mother. The town is steeped in superstitions and embroiled in a town mystery that goes back decades. So, after Cecilia encounters La Segua's lair, which is an underground spring that grants wishes at a cost, she finds herself falling for La Segua's tricks with the promise of everything she's wanted until the wishes go awry and the people she loves are placed in danger. So I used a lot of descriptions and sensory language of the town, of La Segua, the manor where Ceci lives, and the underground spring to build that eerie and unsettling atmosphere of Santa Aguas and everything that you will see in these vengeful wishes.
So I'm going to introduce the essential question for today, which is how do authors craft tension and suspense using the senses? And so we're just going to go over that today. Hopefully that's what sticks with you during the lesson.
Yes. So we're going to go over some key vocabulary that you'll probably hear us reference more than once. And obviously, the two main things that we're going to be talking about is tension and suspense, scene, sensory details, figurative language, and foreshadowing. So we're going to go through them one by one and give a little bit of a definition of each one. So first, let's go to tension, which is the feeling of suspense, uncertainty, or anticipation created by conflict already introduced and character emotions in a specific scene. So everything you've built in the past, as far as the backstory of the character, rears its head in a scene, and that's when we really see the tension, how the character is, um, you know, acting upon what's going on in that specific scene. So next, let's go to suspense. And these two kind of work in tandem. Suspense is a literary device in which tension holds our attention between one moment and another. Suspense happens when the reader is on the edge of a pivotal moment and they don't know what's going to happen next. So suspense is usually introduced by plot questions, introducing some foreshadowing that enhance a scene's suspense and leaves the reader wanting to know what's going to happen next. So then let's go to scene, which we've mentioned a bit already. A scene is just a section of the overall story that contains its own like unique combination of setting, character, dialogue, and sphere of activity. It's an immediate like what's happening now moment in your story. Next is sensory details. And sensory details is descriptive language that appeals to the five senses: sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch, as well as visceral reactions. Visceral reactions are things that we feel like inside, are the tightening of our throat, unsettled in our stomach. Those are visceral reactions that we can have. And then last, we have figurative language, and that is descriptive language used to convey meaning in a way that's different from its literal meaning. So we include similes, metaphors, personification, hyperbole, um, allusions, and idioms. And now we're going to go to and then foreshadowing is a warning or indication of what's to come. So it's like a little hint of what's around the corner, what's approaching. And that usually leaves the readers guessing and wanting to know more. And now we're going to jump into our first excerpt.
Hey, okay. So it's my first excerpt from Lost on Doll Island. I'm just going to jump right in. You know, it's not all creepy dolls, Abuela Jimena says, wrapping her long fingers around my unbroken arm. Startled by her cold touch, I feel every muscle tense, and all the hairs on the back of my neck stand up when she speaks. Legend has it there's a special doll hidden on the island that will grant wishes to whoever finds it. Prize go wide, any wish at all. A magic doll? Seems fake. I try to pull my arm free from her clammy hand, but her grip is surprisingly strong. She doesn't even seem bothered that I'm trying to pull free. My heart starts racing. Gulp. Am I actually in a stranger danger scenario right now? And that's where we end that part.
That's so good.
Okay.
So, just to remind those viewing that we're focusing on is how do writers craft tension and suspense using the senses. So, Cassandra, if you can please break down the example and to show us our essential question in action.
Sure. If you look through this particular excerpt, you see there's certain senses that really relies on the sense of like sensation of touch and feel. So when she wraps her long fingers around his arm, you get the sense that she's gripping her touch is cold. The muscles are tense. All the hairs on the back of his neck are standing up. There's a lot of like what the character's feeling being described, like physically feeling. And so that adds to the tension of the scene. Also, we get a sense that he is feeling trapped and that she's very unwelcoming. Uh, because these are all cold words, like cold hands, clammy hands. Her grip is strong. Like he's in a very unsafe situation, and I would hope that the reader would get that sense from those details. And I feel like the opposite would be if she was very like sweet and gentle touch, where it's in this case it's not that at all. So I really rely on the sense of feel for this particular scene, or sense of touch, sorry. And I feel like those sensory details really add to the tension and kind of and make the reader want to know what happens next.
Yeah, I could definitely feel like the menace kind of radiating from the grandmother figure. And that really comes out really well with like all those specific words, the cold and the tense muscles. I really love how we both have this theme of be careful what you wish for, but in a literal sense. So it's an actual thing that grants your wishes, but at a cost. Can you explain how you built tension around that specific theme?
Yeah. So as I was writing the book, or as I established in the first few pages right away, I established that Diego wants very badly to go back to the way his life was. And so I try to establish that through sensory details of him feeling super uncomfortable, but also him explicitly stating, like, I wish I could go back home and I would do anything um, to do that. And so when we get to the scene and he's actually offered an opportunity uh, to make those wishes come true, um, even though most people in that scenario would know, like, this is a stranger danger scenario. This is a creepy lady. We should not be following what she's saying. Um, he wants it so badly, he'll do anything. So that's the tension between that's being built for the reader. They know it's a bad situation. They know it's a bad decision. Um, but I've established that that's what the character wants. And so he'll do anything to do that. And so hopefully it builds suspense for what's coming next in the story.
Yeah, that's awesome. You left us with like that question of what's he going to choose? Is he actually going to go seek this doll that's going to grant him wishes and stuff?
Yeah.
All right.
Some bad choices.
Can't say I wouldn't try the same if I had the opportunity, though.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're going to go to the student practice portion.
All right. So for this mini activity, I'm going to read the following excerpt from my book, and I would ask that you try to identify the senses that are used to create tension. You could list them out, or you could use a graphic organizer like with circles, like sense of sound, and then you would write the pitter patter on the tile would be your example of that. And so just pay attention to those details and see if you can list them out. And all right. So in this excerpt, I'll just jump right in again. In the hall, Flacco growls in his sleep and kicks out his legs like he's dreaming of running. I listen to the now familiar sound of his paws scraping against the tile. But then he stops. I wait to hear him start dream running again, but instead of hearing Flacco's paws like usual, I hear something else. A pitter patter, almost like the sound of footsteps on the tile, but made by much smaller feet. I hold my breath and listen. Nothing, not even the sound of Flacco snoring. I relax. I must be hearing things. I've been thinking about Doll Island so much, I've started. There it is again, the sound of small, running footsteps, but this time closer. Gulp. Slowly, I turn my head towards the direction of the sound, to the kitchen. I squint into the darkness. I can't see anything in there. I don't want to see anything in there. A giggle fills the air, and every hair on my arms and neck stands up.
Oof.
That's the
Yeah.
end.
So we'll pause here for 3 minutes or so to allow students to do the exercise. And yeah, we'll do a little pause here. Do you want to go through a little bit of the senses that you used here?
Sure. So obviously, rely on this one. I rely more on sense of sound. We hear Flacco scraping his feet on the paws, so we get the sense of like what he's used to hearing, what Diego's used to hearing when he's asleep. He's used to hearing his dog snoring and the paws scraping on the tile. So then, when he hears something that's not supposed to be there, like footsteps, he knows that that's something different. And so, especially when there's like that nothing moment when he doesn't even hear the dog snoring, that's meant to build tension. So it's like the lack of what he's sensing is important. Also, when he's looking into the kitchen and he sees nothing, it's like the absence of his senses or the inability to know what's there from your sensory feedback is adding to the tension and the fear. And so I'm hoping that people picked up on that. Also, the giggle in the air is also sensory, sound
Yeah.
sensory. So very much focused on sound for this one. If you were reading the full book, you know there's also some smell elements, and uh, yeah, and also just the way he feels, like just like the tense feelings and his holding his breath is very much like a physical like
Mhm.
reaction. So I would hope that people would have gotten those small details. If they found other details or if they didn't get all the senses, that's completely fine. We don't. I don't always include all the senses in my description, so it's completely fine if you only got like two or three.
Yeah. I really, like you said, I really love how you utilize the absence of the senses because that's also a great tool. Is the character just wanting to hear something or wanting to see something and it's not there, and it makes it a little mysterious as what's to come next. All right. So next, I'm going to read, from my mentor text, which is an excerpt from these Vengeful Wishes. And I'm going to just dive in. It says, the roads in this town are so dark, guarded by an endless tower of thick trees, that it's hard to believe anyone lives here at all. It's like this place exists inside a bubble, one that causes a slight ringing in my ears and an unsettling tightness in my stomach. Maybe there's a power plant nearby, or I'm slowly dying from the radioactive poison they dump into these small farmland lakes from the many slaughterhouses and their animals pumped with antibiotics. Maybe I watch too many food documentaries and there's a completely different reason for the unease worming its way under my skin. We pass a large tattered sign that reads, Welcome to Santa Aguas, established 1887. Someone graffitied the entire bottom of the billboard with Beware la Cegua in what looks to be blood but is really drippy red paint. All right, so we're going to go into breaking it down. So we're going to remind the audience, how do authors craft tension and suspense through the senses again. So the first little section, the first paragraph, I use more like visceral reactions, right? Like the character hears a ringing and feels an unsettling tightness in their stomach. And this is already letting you know that anxiety is building within the character, right? In the second paragraph, you see that that first sentence is huge. So I kind of utilize like this run-on sentence structure to create like that out of breath sensation. You're creating imagery that also tells you that the author is feeling unease, and not the author, well, the author too, but the character is feeling unease and unsettled in that situation. And then finally, in the last paragraph, you see here that we're using figurative language to compare paint to blood. So this introduces an atmosphere of the town, right? And invokes discomfort. We already know that there's something kind of off about this town. So yeah, that's ways that we can use the senses.
I really, really like this excerpt, and it really brings. I just really like how all those descriptions kind of give this location kind of like a personified creepy character, like it's its own character in the story. So I really, really like these sensory details. So my question for you is, how do you find ways to relate emotions to the reactions of the characters? So when they're feeling these unsettling feelings, how do they react? Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, we are our own sense of inspiration. So, when we're feeling a certain type of way, we can always take note. I kind of feel nauseous when I'm nervous, or, we kind of relate certain details to to emotions. But something that I really recommend for any kind of writer is the Emotion Thesaurus is a great book and is a great source of like inspiration for. It has every emotion you can think of, and then the related uh, feelings that you feel or things that happen to your body when you're experiencing that emotion. So, very highly recommend the Emotion Thesaurus. Now we're going to go into the student practice portion. And here, first, I want to again reiterate that tension is in a scene, right? When you're building tension, you're asking, what does the character feel in this scene, and why do they feel this way? So you've already built this conflict and this backstory for the character that kind of reaches its peak in this scene. And suspense is brought on by like the reader questioning what's going to happen, what comes next. And you do this by introducing questions, right? Like, and a little bit of foreshadowing, like giving hints of what's to come. So there's going to be in the next slide another excerpt from these Vengeful Wishes. And I want you to focus on these three things, which is what plot questions are introduced. Basically, what questions are introduced? How does the character feel in this scene? And what do the senses tell us about this scene? So we're going to go over to the next slide. And we're going to pause the video here to work on the student practice for a bit. Okay. So hopefully that gave you a chance to practice and identify those three questions that really help build the suspense and tension in a scene. Um, the questions that were introduced, there's a lot of questions introduced here, right? Because it's a very dreamy like description. You don't really know what too much of what's going on, especially since it's taken out of context from the book. But you're asking yourself, like, where is she? Who is with her? What does La Segua want? What is her wish? What does she really want? What does she desire? And the character feels like, what does the character feel? Now, this also could be left up to interpretation to the reader, right? Right now, like it's very soft words here, right? We have this the light of the sun touching the skin, so it's a very soft touch. The blue garden door, the rain sodden earth, those are all the senses that are in this scene that create a sense of almost like soothing, right? So she's in a very like dreamy kind of state. uh Obviously what's going on is not normal, it's mysterious, it's a little scary, but she almost feels welcomed by this entity. So, all those are things that help build a scene, are these three questions to keep in mind when you're building your own story. And let's see here. Recap. All righty. Go ahead.
Okay. So the main takeaway that we're hoping that people can take away from this lesson is, as you use your senses to enhance your writing and help build tension and suspense in a scene. Include sensory details that will help your reader feel what your character feels. Tension's built when the reader understands the emotional stakes for the character. Suspense is introduced when questions arise in the story, like what comes next and why does it matter to the character.
You can also take a more narrow point of view, the reader's point of view, and focus on like the smaller details of your world, right? The microscopic details, and use figurative language here. Have fun and play with the language that you're using to create this sort of feeling. When you want to make a setting, especially come alive, focus on the small, specific details that play into your character's emotional state. So you relate the details to how your character is feeling. These are some examples that I have here, like the manor choked in crimson ivy made her own throat feel tight. So this house is wrapped in this like greenery and it's like suffocating. And so the character, you get the feeling that the character also feels suffocated. Another example, she sank into the cracked leather of the Chesterfield and let the cushion consume her weary bones. Both the sofa and the character are feeling very weary, tired, and probably a little abused at the moment. So those are good ways to relate setting to character.
Those are great descriptors for sure. Um, uh, and also something to keep in mind would be, do certain senses invoke unsettling memories for the characters? So as they're remembering things, or experiencing certain senses, that might trigger an emotion from a previous memory, and that can add to the unsettling moment. So, for example, the mildewed air reminded her of the dark corner of her closet, her hiding spot when the voices outside grew too loud in pitch. So that in that moment, the person is feeling a certain way or remembering something, and that's helping invoke a past memory, and so that adds to the tension. So that's something to think about as well.
Yes, nice. Alrighty,
All
and
right.
then now we're gonna move to our final student prompt, where we're gonna ask you to write a quick paragraph that uses the senses to describe the character's emotional state based on these settings featured in both our books, in these Vengeful Wishes and Lost on Doll Island. Now, this is a quick little excerpt from these Vengeful Wishes. I did remove mention of what the image is to kind of like, stretch your creative muscles a little bit. So we want you to describe the setting and how the character is feeling without actually naming the place. So over here is everything is overrun with bramble and palms now, vines and thick, imposing trunks. Even with my music playing, I can hear the birds. Not the gentle chirping, but the echoing squawk of a predator searching for food. And judging from the underlying smell of sweet rot, I think something died nearby. I plant myself upwind, still close so I don't feel as isolated. Something about its looming presence feels protective, like I've got somewhere to run in case the wilds turn against me. So here she is outside painting and she's going close to the manor to feel a little sense of protection from the woods that are around her. So a little quick, extra thing is like the plot question that's introduced here is why would the wilds turn against her? Like what's in the woods that's making her so afraid? And why is the manor, like this scary, spooky abandoned house, what's giving her comfort? Okay, so here we go to the student prompt.
So without telling us what it is, describe the setting and the character's emotions using these senses. So you would choose from one of these four scenes, the abandoned manor, a cavern underground or an underground lake, swamp, or a dark attic. So you could choose any of those, and using sensory details and descriptive language, uh, let us know about the character's emotions. How are they feeling? Where are they? And so this would be a really fun exercise to do that with. And
Yeah, we'll take a quick pause here so students can have a little bit of time to work on this. Okay, so hopefully you chose one of the four settings and you were able to describe it and your character without actually naming the place. Our previous slide kind of went through an example for the manor. So um, you can always share this with a partner and see if they can guess which of the four you chose.
okay, so these are some final student prompts to leave you with, some alternate assignments based on today's lesson, uh, which again is how do authors use the five senses to craft tension in their writing. So you would go through and you could expand on the short paragraph you just started. So what you just wrote, you could expand on that, consider using any senses you may have left out the first time. Uh, Another option would be to change out the sensory reactions in the paragraph, like a Mad Libs, to see how it affects the story, and think about how this changes the mood and the tension in the scene. Uh, you could change them out and make the scene completely sweet and innocent, or flip it around and make it seem really sinister. It's really up to you, and this would be a fun way to see how those descriptors really change that. Alternately, For the third one, you could choose one of the locations from the previous slide. If you don't feel like writing a full paragraph or writing any more, you can just list out some of the five senses you would experience in some of these places and some of the specific details, sensory details of the place. You can do a word map, a list with columns, any sort of graphic organizer that is most convenient to you or that you feel most comfortable with. But that'd be a good way to still do the exercise and still list out those sensory feelings without having to write out a full story if that's not what you're into. So yeah, these are some options for to extend the assignment if you want to.
And I
But
think that's going to bring us to our final thoughts on the essential question, which is again, how do we craft tension and suspense using the senses? And we're just really thankful to all of you for trusting us with this and for joining us and listening to how we craft suspense and tension. I'm sure there's many ways that different authors craft like their scenes, but these are great exercises to kind of get you started and just have fun, right? Play with words, play with language, pay attention to when you're feeling afraid or anxious, and see if you can jot down some notes and see like how can I work through this emotion and how can my characters work through these emotions. Things to remember is that you can build the tension in a scene by providing the sensory details and describing the many ways the character is experiencing them in that moment. This helps the reader understand what the character feels and draws them in to feel it too, right? You want the reader to also experience what your character is experiencing. So if you feel it, you can write it, then go back and rewrite it, rework it. Um, Finally, if you for more craft resources, check out the rest of the craft panels at this year's festival, as well as our mini craft lessons on the educator page of the festival website. Yeah, thank you so much for
thank
joining us,
you.
Cassandra. Thank you so much for doing this with me. I think we made a
Thank
great
you.
team.
Thank you so much.
Bye, guys. Thank
Bye,
you.
guys. That's that.